Her triumphs, I took a group of women that didn't believe in themselves, and I just believed in them. Her trials,
I never wanted to go to practice. I was losing a ton of weight.
Her story,
I just put my faith in God and just trusted the system.
Her why.
I want people to see what I did and say, oh, that's so awesome. I'm going to be better than that. That would be how I hope that this journey ends.
This is Her Why, where we tell the stories from BYU women's sports. Here is your host, Lauren McLean.
We're so glad you've joined us for Her Why, where we celebrate the women who make BYU sports great. Today's guest is Brynn Sproul, former Cougar swim star with 5 MPSF titles in the 500 freestyle, 100 backstroke, 200 backstroke, and the 800 and 400 freestyle relays. Plus, she's a BYU record holder for the 200 backstroke. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on with me, Brynn.
Thank you for having me.
So you started BYU back in 2018 as a freshman, and you just graduated this past spring. Is it so strange not being able to suit up for the Cougar swim team and prepare for another season?
It is. It's really weird watching, I keep track of everybody's swim schedules and stuff like that, and they all started their season, and it was really weird for me not to be a part of that after 5 years. It's just so weird.
And do you still have contact with any of the swimmers?
I do. I try to keep in contact with ones that I'd swam with more often, especially with those that I'd trained with. And I have a couple of really good friends that are still on the team, or one that just came back from his mission, stuff like that. So I try to stay in contact. And whenever I go up and visit Utah, I always want to stop by and say hi kind of thing. So
that's got to be a strange feeling since that was such a big part of your life for so long. So what does life look like for you right now?
Right now, it's a little crazy, I think. Crazy in that I don't know what my life is going to look like. Mm-hmm. For so long, it was so easy because it was school and swim, and your life's kind of not in your hands at that point just because everything is for those two things. And now that I'm not in school and I'm not swimming anymore, I have a lot more freedom to choose what I want to do. And so I'm trying to figure that out because for so long it was such an easy, straightforward answer. So right now I'm at home in Las Vegas, Nevada, and trying to figure out what the next step for me is. In January, I do have plans to go. I'm going through the International Language Program. It's called ILP. And I'm going to the Dominican Republic for 3.5 months to teach kids English. And so that's kind of the next big thing for me. And then we're still working on everything else.
Okay, but that's a really good start. What made you want to go to the Dominican Republic to teach English?
My parents actually met teaching English in Russia.
Wow.
Through ILP. They were some of the people that kind of helped start it. And then I have a good teammate, Josue Dominguez. He went to the Olympics in 2021. For the DR, and he's from the Dominican Republic. And so I always wanted to try something new. I always loved the idea of doing ILP. And so I thought that would be a really cool opportunity.
I love it. You're getting some things figured out. I love it. How did you initially get involved in swimming as you grew up in Las Vegas?
I'm the fourth of 5 kids, and my older 2 siblings, they kind of got involved with one of the club teams here because they had a friend who was on a club team here in Vegas. And then my family actually moved to Cedar City area. It's a little town called Enoch, Utah, in the southern Utah area. And there was a swim team there that my older siblings joined. And my mom always loved the idea of swimming because she could just take all of us kids there, and the practices were usually around the same time rather than driving all over Kingdom Come to drop us off at different sports. So it's kind of not the only option available to us, but kind of the direction we were all pushed into. And so I learned to swim in Utah. That's where I had a private coach that my brother, just older than we both learned the strokes together. We moved back to Vegas around when I was 10, I think. And when I was 12, I just realized that I really loved swimming. And I was like, Mom, I want to join a team. And so we found the closest team, which ended up just being the best team. And in my opinion, I'm a little biased, but so we found that team and joined, and a couple of my other siblings ended up joining with me, and it was history from there.
So you mentioned that you fell in love with swimming around the age of 12, but before that, because it was kind of, you mentioned that it was the only thing that was available to you. Was there something else you wanted to do?
I was homeschooled, and so there was this local homeschool soccer league that we did for like a few months when we lived in Utah. And I enjoyed that. And I remember my dad like practicing with me in the backyard, but nothing ever like stuck out to me like swimming did. And when I got older, like every other swimmer I know were always like, man, I should have picked this sport or this sport just because swimming is so demanding. And so I learned to really enjoy volleyball just for fun. And so I was like, whenever people ask me what sport would you do if you weren't a swimmer, I always say volleyball just because I have so much fun with it. But I really do believe swimming was kind of my calling in life. I don't think I would have had the same relationship with volleyball as I do with swimming.
Because swimming is so demanding, like you mentioned, do you think it's important to have other activities that you do outside of swimming? Like you said, you mentioned volleyball for yourself. Do you think that's an important thing?
Oh, absolutely. Because it can take so much of your life and thinking. And I mean, I eat, sleep, breathe, swim when I'm in season kind of thing. So my dad was kind of into the sports for our family, and my mom was more all about music. And so we had a requirement, like we had to learn piano. I was always able to find some escape in that. And it was sometimes hard to balance, especially in high school, like the demands of what I wanted from music with what I wanted out of swimming. But we made it work, and I'm very grateful because piano has had a very huge impact in my life.
Okay, so how did you pick the backstroke specifically? Obviously, that was one of your biggest strengths in swimming. How did you pick that event?
It kind of picked me. I feel like a lot of people are talented and blessed to be good at multiple different things, but from day one, backstroke was always my strength. I remember when I tried out for the club team here in Vegas, or even when we were in Utah, like when coaches saw me swim, they always noticed my backstroke. Like it came so naturally to me. And so backstroke really picked me. It wasn't really my choice. And I remember in high school being so frustrated that I didn't get a choice in it because I'm like, other people get to kind of move around and I'm just stuck with backstroke. And at times there was a little bit of animosity between me and backstroke. I mean, when you do something for so long, sometimes you can get a little sick of it, especially when results aren't coming that you want and stuff like that. But so backstroke really picked me. I didn't really have a choice.
So interesting. So when did you start thinking like, okay, swimming is something I can do at the collegiate level, maybe even for Team USA? At what point did that go through your mind?
My club team that I was on, I remember when I moved up to the highest level, it was called Gold Group at that point. And the coach, she's from Romania. Her name is Lorena. And she saw potential in me. Like I never thought I had the ability to swim at a high level. Like I felt like I had started late in life. A lot of swimmers start at, 6, 7, 8, and I started at age 12 competing competitively. And I never really thought that I would take it really that far. But I remember her having a conversation with me where she was like, if you want this, I can take you there kind of thing. Like I can make you a top recruit for BYU if that's really what you want. And at that point, like BYU was, my dream school when I was 14. And anyway, and so she saw the potential in me that I didn't even know I had. And she kind of inspired me to want that and chase that and believe that I could do it. She's never been wrong. Whenever she's told me that she can do something or she can make a swimmer into something, like she's proven time and time again that she can. And so that was a huge moment for me to come to that realization.
Well, you were a Nevada State champion and record holder in the 100-yard backstroke. How do you feel like those accomplishments in high school kind of set the tone for your collegiate swimming career?
I feel like it helped me get a taste of what I was capable of. Like high school really is a smaller scene, a smaller level of college. And so it kept me wanting more kind of thing. Like I could see that I was having success at this level, and it made me wonder what I could accomplish at the next level, at the collegiate level. And you get one record and you want to keep the ball rolling kind of thing. And I know in Nevada, high school swimming isn't a huge thing. It's more about the club. And so, that was cool getting that record, like having my name kind of in the books or whatever, but it made me want more. And so it just kind of gave you a little taste of what you could achieve. And I think it just was fuel to the fire.
You mentioned that BYU was always your dream school. Why was that?
My parents had been to BYU. I had gone to a swim camp, I think, when I was 15 or 16. I don't know. It was the school. Like, I mean, as an LDS girl, it was, kind of what's expected or whatever. And when I started getting recruited, I kind of wasn't sure anymore, just because swimming was a bigger deal to me. And I wanted to look at other schools and other schools that had, better swim programs too. And so it kind of became less of like a sure thing and more of this is an option. And so, but eventually I obviously came around and picked BYU, and I'm so grateful that I did.
What was that recruiting process like for you? BYU coming after you, and I believe Boise State and a couple other schools. What was that like for you?
It was exciting. It was really cool to be wanted and recognize that this wasn't just in my head. Like this was real. This was legit. And so, yeah, Boise, UNLV actually, and that's where my club team practices, is at the UNLV pool. So I was very familiar with the coaching staff and the team, and then BYU. And those were kind of my top three. And I had a couple other schools that had reached out, and like University of North Texas. I remember, so one of the current BYU coaches, Rachel Friel, she was the one that recruited me when she was at UNT at that point. And we made the connection a little bit later. But anyway, so yeah, those three schools were my top picks, and it was fun. I went on a recruiting trip to all three. And they each had something different that like was kind of pulling me. Boise State had an incredible women's team that had won, I think, 3 Mountain West Conference championships. They had an incredible backstroker there who had qualified for NCAAs, I think twice, maybe 3 times. And so I had that, like, this girl went to NCs as a backstroker, and that was my strength. And so I was like, it's possible to get there with them. And UNLV had, that it was familiar, and I knew the coaches. I loved the coaches. Coach Ben is the head coach, and he's just incredible. I respect him a lot. And the fact that it was close to home is very familiar, and I'm very much a homebody. Like, I love my comfort zone, and it's really hard for me to branch out. And then BYU, of course, just the standards of BYU, that was kind of knowing that I'd be surrounded by people who had my same beliefs, and I wouldn't have to worry about, being invited to a party that was going to make me uncomfortable or something like that. And so that was just the spiritual aspect of BYU was huge. And in the end, I ended up having a spiritual experience. I was listening to General Conference in October of my senior year, and I remember just having the impression BYU is where you need to go. And so I picked BYU, and I had moments my freshman year where I questioned whether that was the right choice for me. And I also had moments towards the end of my freshman year where it was just reaffirmed to me that that was where I was supposed to be. And then obviously the rest of the years, it was just awesome experience. And I knew that was Heavenly Father's way of confirming to me that I'd made the right choice.
Which is pretty incredible, because you had a great freshman year. You not only made it to the collegiate level, also the national level, and qualified for the 2020 Tokyo Olympic trials as a freshman. And that is unreal. So take us through the race which qualified you for the trials.
Oh, that was a race. It was the 100 backstroke, and I was at U.S. Nationals. I had a couple of teammates with me, and I remember swimming in prelims. I went at best time, and I was like, wow, because for me, I'm a final swimmer. I always swim better in the evening. Like, you have to swim prelims, and you have to swim fast enough to make it back. But I always saw a time drop in finals. And I remember talking to my coach, and she was like, you can do it. Like, you can do it. And in my mind, I was like, well, I know I can do it eventually. Like, probably not right now. Like, I'm just going to, do my best. And I remember in the race, like, I get in the water. I have my pre-race routine, and I get in the water, and I start my race. And I felt great. And I flipped after that first 50, and it's the last stretch. And I was just like, I just took off. Like, I felt so good. And I remember just pushing off that wall with everything I had. And I still didn't know at this point. I just knew it was going to be a good race. Like, I was so excited about this race. And I finished and I touched the wall, and then I saw that time, and like my jaw dropped. I could not believe that I had just gotten this time. Like, it was always a goal of mine, but I never thought I'd get it in the 100 back before the 200 back. The 200 back was always my strength, and I just could not believe that I had gotten it in this 100 backstroke. And it was a surreal experience, and it was incredible. And I was thrilled, and my teammates were there and super supportive and happy for me, and it just made it a very special moment.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll hear more from former BYU swim star Brynn Sproul. Welcome back to Her Why. I'm Lauren McLean. We're continuing our conversation with BYU swim record holder Brynn Sproul. Brynn, how did you manage the mental and physical challenges of waiting an extra year for the Olympic trials due to COVID-19?
I remember right before COVID hit, I felt like I was ready. I was like at the peak of my training. I felt super confident. And then I remember the practice I was at when everything started going downhill. Like each time we were doing long course, and each time we'd finish the 100, our coach would be like, "Oh, this update, this just happened. And then by the end of the practice, it was like, we're done. Everything is shut down. And it was really hard. I mean, at that point, we didn't really know how long it was going to be and stuff. And so that was more of the battle was, I'm expecting, okay, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe. And after a few days, I was like, I got to get out of Utah. And so my mom came, picked me up. I went back home. And that helped a little bit, but it was still really, really hard because there was no access to a pool. And for me, swimming isn't just what I love, but it's kind of a form of therapy for me. Once I get in the water, I can kind of let everything else go. And so I tried to stay in shape as much as possible, just doing whatever I could in our garage. We have some exercise equipment type things, and but it was starting to kind of have a toll. And my mom, I mean, I'm forever grateful for my mom. She was reaching out to everybody she could about any backyard pools that anybody had available that we could swim in. And I know a lot of other swimmers who did the same thing, but we found somebody who was willing to let us use their backyard pool. And it's this short little thing, like it's not gonna do the same as what we needed. But for me, it was a huge mental kind of release. Like just being in the water, being in a swimsuit again, just was so big. And then of course, eventually pools started opening up, and my club coach would send me and my brother workouts, and we'd go and do them until they opened enough for teams to swim together. And it was a very slow, gradual process, but it was enough. And so eventually I finished that summer with my club team, which I think was important. My club coach has always been somebody that I've trusted completely. And so knowing that I needed to get back in shape and I had a long ways to go, because we were out of the water for like 3 months, I think. And so for me, that's huge. Like swimmers taking 1 or 2 days off, it's like you feel a difference. And so 3 months was just kind of unimaginable, but I trusted her enough, and I felt like she got me in a really good place shape wise for me to go back to BYU for my junior year. And so that helped me just go into that year with some confidence that I had some training to back up what I needed to do.
What an interesting and unique time. It just was a crazy time in the world, and I can't imagine being an athlete during that time. You eventually make it to the trials. How did you do in that meet?
I didn't do my best. It was a great experience, like going to and competing at that level, just with the professionalism of everything, just the people who ran the meet, the other athletes. It was a great environment, great experience. I didn't perform my best. I was going through kind of a lot mentally that year, I think, and physically. We did some tests and found out that I was anemic, which I just did not have the energy levels that I was used to having. I couldn't close a race like I was used to doing. And so it was kind of a battle with, trying to figure out how to get back mentally and physically from that. And so it was a great experience, and I walked away with a lot of hard-earned lessons and things that I needed to work on. But obviously I did not perform how I would have liked.
So after qualifying for the Olympic trials your freshman year, did you think at that moment you were going to be at the top of your swim game your entire time at BYU?
I think so. It's kind of hard not to get a little cocky, I think, and just everything seems like anything seems within your reach at that point. And so I just, I was like, well, if I can qualify for Olympic trials, I can do anything I want. And I always kind of had that mindset. I always knew what I wanted, and I knew I could train enough to get there. And so it was just a matter of getting it. And I feel like I've always had a very good work ethic. And when I have a goal, I know how to get to that goal. I know the work that it takes. But I also had the realistic expectation that things don't go according to plan. I've had a lot of ups and downs throughout high school and college, and I'm sure we'll probably get into some of that. But so I knew that, things don't always go according to plan, but they always work out in the end kind of thing. And so I'm like, if it doesn't happen this year, I was a freshman at this point. And so I was like, I have 3 more years and it'll work out eventually, just because swimming is so unpredictable in that some years are just off and you just can't, you might be close. But I'd had a period in high school where I went 2 years trying to drop in my tuner back, and I just couldn't get it until my senior year, and then I was finally able to get that drop that I had wanted. And so I knew just kind of the patience it takes too. And so so I knew I could achieve stuff. It just might take longer than I would hope.
Well, you had an incredible career, MPSF championships, winning multiple events, breaking BYU program records. How do you feel? You mentioned that you have a great work ethic. How did your training and mindset allow you to consistently perform at a high level while at BYU?
I think it came down to my coach too. Yolanda Bates was my main coach at BYU, and she had incredible belief. Her mental strength was important in me finding mine. I always struggled at swim meets. I always had a hard time handling the nerves. It just was something I still struggled with up until the very end. Before a race, I'd get super nervous. And so her confidence in me was really important. When it came to training, I would, push it. I would work my butt off. But when it came time for meets, that was where I had a hard time. And so getting the confidence that I needed, because that is important when it comes to races. That was my biggest battle. And my coach, Yolanda, she was really important in helping me get there. And because I rely so much on my training to find the confidence, there were a couple years where it was hard to see how I was doing better in practice. And Yolanda and I worked a lot on that. And so for me, it was more finding something each year that I could work on. And a lot of those years, it was usually my mental game. And so just finding, one thing mentally I could work on, one thing physically, and that would adjust throughout the season as I felt like I accomplished that. And then you just always have to be pushing the barrier and the boundary and stuff. And so that kind of pushed me.
I know your faith also plays a big role in your life. As you went throughout your collegiate career, how did you rely on that in your preparation for meets and just in life?
Prayer obviously is a huge thing for me. I would pray constantly, especially before a race. Just that I would, perform my best. And sometimes my best wasn't what I wanted it to be. And so then it came to, well, why wasn't it enough? I felt like Heavenly Father was trying to build me as a person and not necessarily as a swimmer, even though he used swimming as a tool to do that for me. I had a lot of spiritual experiences at very difficult meets. My freshman year, I remember I had a very successful season until the very end. We had our Utah meet, which I was feeling the pressure big time, and I kind of crumpled under it. And I had a really hard time after that. And then but my dad was there, and I remember him giving me a blessing, and I was able to find some peace and comfort in knowing that, it was one meet, and Heavenly Father doesn't value me because of my swimming success. He loves me for who I am. And just throughout each disappointing meet I had, I was able to find comfort in knowing that there was something Heavenly Father wanted me to learn from it.
Family seems like it means a lot to you, and you got to swim alongside your brother Evan in your final year at BYU. What was that experience like for you?
I do. I love my family. I mean, I was homeschooled, and so I was around my family all the time. And I remember in high school, like, my mom would try and encourage me to go out and hang out with friends, and I was tired from practice, and also I just wanted to hang out with my family. Like, my dad's super into playing board games and stuff, and I mean, my family's a hoot, and so I love them. And so swimming with Evan, because he is the only other one in our family who ended up like taking swimming super seriously, and was that's how he and I really became close, was through swimming. I mean, COVID was a blessing in that way, that I was able to be there for him and he was able to be there for me my freshman year. It was fun having him at meets and stuff. I did try to give him his space. I didn't want to be like that hovering older sister that like was embarrassing to him or whatever. And I felt like we had a good balance. Like, when he needed me, he knew I was there. When I needed him, I knew he was there. But we each had our own kind of friend group, and so we were able to kind of develop our own social circles too. And so it was really fun having him around, because we do swim similar events too. So we're able to train together, which was really fun because we hadn't done that since club. And it was a lot of fun.
Your final year of swimming was cut a little bit short because of a hip injury. What was that like for you when you heard that from the doctors?
It was probably one of the hardest days of my life, honestly. It was this hip injury I'd been dealing with for a couple of years. I had some pain that we thought was just musculature, and we were just kind of dealing with the symptoms for about a year. And then my fourth year at BYU, my senior year, we actually found out about all this stuff, and we kept getting imaging, and each image showed something else. Started with an X-ray, then an MRI, then the CT, and each time, and each new doctor that we talked with kind of would point out something new. And so my senior year, we actually thought my season was done. We thought I was going to be done with swimming, because they found a bone lesion, a bone tumor in the neck of my femur up in my right hip area. And so they thought, it could be cancerous. And so there was a chance I was done then. So after meeting with, specialists and stuff like that, finding out that I wasn't done, I could push through. Like, it was really just the pain. It wasn't going to do any further damage. And so it's just, if I could handle the pain, I could keep going. And so that was kind of when I had all the success that last couple of meets after I found out, because I found out about my hip Christmas time, December of 2021, we got all the imaging results and stuff. And I went home. I had a video call with an oncologist, and that's when everything, and I remember getting a blessing, and, there were a lot of prayers on my behalf. And then that day we found out during the video call that it was okay. Like, if I was okay with the pain, I could keep going. And I had an incredible end of that season. That was when I won all my events at conference, my individuals, and I broke the school record, and I had a great end of my season. And I was like, okay, like, let's keep going. And I honestly think, like, my training had kind of been on pause when we were figuring out all of the hip stuff. And so I didn't know how I was going to perform at conference, because I rely so much on my training, and I was like, just so grateful that I could be competing. And so mentally, I was in the best state of mind, I think, going into that meet, which is why I think I had so much success. And then after our Denver meet in January, I was warming up, and I slipped on a backstroke start, and I felt like something different in my hip. And I was like, I don't know. I finished the meet, and then I wanted to get a cortisone injection. I had gotten that the year previous just to help mask some of the pain so that I didn't have to worry so much about it. So they wanted to get another x-ray to make sure everything looked good. And in that x-ray, it showed that near the bone tumor, I had gotten a stress fracture, and it was breaking through the neck of my femur. And so, and I was like, I was at a loss. And in my mind, I was like, this is not the end. Like, I've been through this. This isn't the end. And it ended up taking, I think, 4 doctors. Like, they just kept showing my imaging to doctor after doctor. And I remember meeting with my athletic trainer, and he told me, Brynn, you have to be done. Like, if this breaks through, it's going to be, like, just the risk outweighed the possibility. Like, they told me I was a ticking time bomb and it could break at any moment. And so I had to face that, and it was a huge, huge shock, because I had been through a very similar situation a year previous, and I had a miracle, and I was waiting for that miracle again, waiting for the, oh, just kidding, you can keep going. And it was really hard for me to understand why Heavenly Father would bless me with a miracle a year previous, and then have me end so close to the finish line and cut it short. And so I'd been to the temple the night before we found out that it was, I mean, I kind of saw it coming at this point, and my coach took me to the temple, and and I just remember sitting in the celestial room, and I just felt like I came to this realization that I was holding so hard onto something that I wanted, and it wasn't necessarily something Heavenly Father wanted for me. And so I recognized that I needed to let go and accept His will for me, which I felt like I had done a very good job of doing that all my life until it came to this moment. And it was so, so hard. And that next day I got the official, you're done. I called my mom and just cried on the phone for like an hour, took a pause, went to a class that I had to go to, got out of that class, called my mom, started crying all over again. And just, I mean, those next few days were some of the hardest days ever. And saying goodbye to the sport on not the way I wanted to, not on my terms, was just really, really hard for me. And I begged and pleaded for one more meet, just one more meet. And they did. They let me do the Utah meet as long as I promised not to use my legs, not to kick. And that was, I think, really good for me to gain some closure. I got to swim one event, the 200 freestyle, and I was in the outside lane, not allowed to use my legs, but it was just me getting to swim it was huge for me in knowing, like, to experience the last time warming up, the last time on the blocks, the last time suiting up, the last time putting my cap and goggles on. It was just kind of a surreal moment. And I remember touching the wall afterwards and just crying and realizing that was the end, and it wasn't what I'd pictured my end to look like, but that was kind of it for me. And moving forward, I had a lot of spiritual experiences that gave me some comfort and peace. I mean, it's still hard knowing that I had more goals and I had more I wanted out of swimming, and I won't get that chance to achieve those.
You placed 3rd in that meet, by the way, which is just an incredible feat. Like, I can't even fathom or understand how you were able to do that without using your legs. And I can't imagine the pain that you've been going through mentally, physically, emotionally, after having to let go of something you've done your entire life. So how would you say or sum up how you've been able to move forward in your life this past year without swimming?
I had surgery the day everybody left for conference, and so that kind of threw me straight into that process of just trying to recover and stuff. And so physically, I felt like I had my own new goals, like a new goal of walking, a new goal of squatting to almost 90 degrees, a new goal of running eventually. And so physically, I felt like still kind of a similar mindset of, you have something you're trying to reach and achieve. Mentally, it was and emotionally, it was a huge battle knowing that. And I had a hard time letting go. I still thought I was going to swim again. I knew my club coach. She would be willing to coach me. And I mean, the club team in Provo, I knew I could swim with them. Like, I wasn't sure if that was it for me for swimming. And so I think that helped me kind of get through the process, knowing that was still at the end if I wanted to. But then in the end, I realized that there were other things that I wanted out of life too. And you only are 22, 23 once. And so I was like, swimming was great. And I had a lot of amazing experiences. I'll always wish that I had gotten to finish and just achieve the rest of the goals that I had. But I've found fulfillment in other areas of my life. And Heavenly Father has put some incredible friends in my life. I made a lot of great friends last year in the summertime that helped me find joy outside of what I was used to, swimming and music and stuff like that. Just, they were kind of the group that I started playing a lot of volleyball with. It made me make friends outside of being an athlete. Like, for a long time, that had been my identity, was being a student athlete. And at this point, this last summer, I had graduated, I was done swimming, and so that wasn't what made me me anymore. And so a lot of it was finding out who I was, and I was able to figure that out as I found a new support system in that process of doing that. And so that was the biggest moment for me, was realizing after I graduated that I no longer, when you're getting to know someone and you ask all these get to know you questions, it wasn't, where do you go to school? What are you studying? What do you do? I'm like, those were all easy answers for me for such a long time. I go to BYU. I'm studying communication disorders. I am a student athlete. I swim. These are my main events. Like, it was so easy. And so that, realizing that I couldn't claim that anymore, I kind of had to fall back on my faith a little bit more and recognize that wasn't what made me me. Like, first and foremost, I am a child and a daughter of God, of Heavenly Father. And it was time for me to figure out who I was outside of all of that. And it was kind of a process, but it was a lot of fun too, to realize that there was more to me and more to life than just swimming, when that had been everything for the longest time.
Incredible. We're talking with Brynn Sproul, former BYU Cougar swim star. Brynn, you have such an incredible story, and I know you've been through some incredibly difficult things, and I just can't wait to see what happens to you here moving forward. We're all rooting for you, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
You can download and listen to all episodes of Her Why on the BYU Radio app or wherever you find podcasts. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio.